Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Spirit of Liberty. Hope this message will be a help and a blessing to you today. Appreciate you joining me, especially those of you joining me live. And hope you get a lot out of this program. And we're going to be talking, go right into it. Going to be talking about insecurity today. Insecurity, that is something that a lot of people struggle with. And what I did was for this particular topic, I put my thoughts together, I put my outline together, and then I had some time and I started looking into just reading different articles on this subject, and I was amazed at how much we had in common. And particularly one of the things I read from WebMD. Now, I'm not typically somebody who gets into, modern psychology and all that kind of stuff. I always, I'm not against looking into those things and reading some of that stuff, but I always do want to approach everything with a biblical mindset. I want to think biblically about all things. And so, I like to, go to the Bible, but I'm not against referring to some of those things. I'm not saying there's not something that you can learn from them, but, when you've been in the ministry for a long time, when you've been somebody who observes people for a long time and you see certain behavior, and when you start seeing certain patterns, as a pastor, it's just kind of my natural instinct to wonder, okay, why are people doing this all of a sudden? If I start seeing everybody start wearing a certain hairdo, I'm like, where's this coming from? Because no dude's going to think, to just start curling his hair. But when every teenage boy you see has curly hair, you start wondering where it comes from. And, obviously that's something that's more on the outward. But when it comes to certain sins, when it comes to certain mental disorders, whatever, and you start seeing so many people are struggling in these same areas, I want to know what's causing all of these things. It's not a coincidence that we are having just mass struggles in certain areas. And so, as a pastor, I want to be a help to people. I want to, I want to be able to help as many people as I can at one time. So, you start looking into these things and paying attention probably in ways that maybe most individuals don't. And, you can learn a lot. And so, what I have in my notes is just kind of something that I believe on this subject based on my own observations, watching people over the years, dealing with people over the years. But then I'm gonna start out though by reading an article that I just read from WebMD, because I couldn't believe how much of the same stuff it said in here that I had in my notes. And so but this is from WebMD, and it says signs of insecurity. It says everyone feels a little unsure at times. As humans, we constantly think, and some of our thoughts can be filled with doubt. This can lead to thoughts about insecurity. Too much insecurity can lead to other problems in relationships, in your everyday life. However, there are ways you can work through insecure thoughts and live life more confidently. And again, I think it's very important that we have some confidence. We don't want to have arrogance. Okay? I believe there's a difference between confidence. I believe there's a difference between confidence, security, and somebody who's just arrogant. Okay, there's definitely a big difference there. Don't mistake those. Don't mistake those two things. And Abaddon the Annihilator said it's becoming more common among young and single men, sadly. And it is true. And I'm mainly gearing this towards men. I mean, obviously women struggle in this area big time, and I'll probably cover some of the reasons for those. I'm mainly wanting to focus it on men, but this is a real problem in young men. And I've had people just ask me before, what my thoughts are on it. And, if I just wanted to keep it brief and to the point and just say, what's the biggest problem with people's insecurity? I'll say it right now, social media. Social media is messing up people's perception of reality. And I think the older generation, because we've lived in the real world longer, because we were from a world before there was social media, we're able to kind of see through a lot of this foolishness, where young people, they are very isolated today in a lot of ways, and they've grown up around social media, and I don't think they realize how fake it is. So I do think that that's one of the reasons they struggle with it so much. And Tim C says you should do a Bible question answer live stream at some point. I've tried doing that before. A lot of times, though, especially doing these in the afternoon, I don't always have a big enough live audience to keep the interaction going. But if you have any related questions, or even unrelated, if I don't think I'm going to take real long in this today, you can always ask them. But I might try that in the future. Maybe if I would announce it ahead of time, people would come ready. But I do enjoy doing that kind of thing, even though I'm not the fastest in the world at thinking on their feet. But that is a good idea. But anyway, so let's go ahead and read more of this article. So this is what is insecurity. Insecurity is a feeling of inadequacy, not being good enough, and uncertainty. It produces anxiety about your goals, relationships, ability to handle certain situations. Everybody deals with insecurity from time to time, and it can appear in all areas of life and come from a variety of causes. It might stem from a traumatic event, patterns of previous experience, social conditioning, learning rules by observing others, or local environments such as school, work, or home. And I don't want to get too sidetracked, but that paragraph I just read is right within that paragraph is the cause and of so many of these problems, and in reality where we can find the solution in some ways. Hopefully I'll get back to that. I don't want to get too sidetracked. It says it can also stem from general instability. People who experience unpredictable upsets in daily life are more likely to feel insecure about ordinary sources, and routines. On the other hand, insecurity can have no definite external cause. Instead, it can appear as a quirk of personality or brain chemistry. Understanding the nature of insecurities can help you manage your own and offer others the support they need. And so, again, yeah, a lot of people do think, oh, this is just my personality. I'm just an insecure person. Well, it's a bad trait. And even if something is your personality, if it's a problem and if it's causing problems in your life, you should fix it. You need to strive to not be that way, and don't just stay that way. Ask the Lord to help get you out of that. Seek help getting out of that mindset, because that is not a good place to be. So it goes here to types of insecurity. It says there are almost limitless areas of potential insecurity. Moreover, insecurity often bleeds over from one area of life into another. However, there are some types of insecurity that appear frequently. Relationship insecurity. One of the most common kinds of insecurity concerns relationships or attachments. Attachment theory originated out of the desire to connect the attachment patterns of early childhood to later relationship patterns and expectations. When a child's attachment figures, often parents or guardians, aren't reliably available and supportive, the child often feels insecure, forms a negative self-image in relationship models, and experiences greater emotional distress and maladjustment later in life. Relationship or attachment insecurities don't need to begin in early childhood. They can arise wherever previous experience or personal insecurity undermines someone's security in their closest relationship. And I'm going to stop in this article for a little bit, because that really takes me to the first point that I wanted to talk about on this subject. But I believe one of the reasons there is so much insecurity today, and especially in men, okay, is I do believe our poor family values that our culture has, and just weak families, are a big part of that. So many people today are growing up in broken homes. They're growing up in fatherless homes. And let me just say, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but here, as a Christian, something that we are thankful for, and something I want to remind us of, that we all need to understand, is even when you do not have an ideal situation, because of the fact that there is a God and because we have faith, you can overcome these things. Okay? You can, if you are someone who is at a disadvantage, it does not disqualify you from success or make it impossible or even unlikely that you will be successful. And we're going to look at some examples here real quick. If you have faith, Okay, if you can, if you are a person of faith, and not just somebody who's saved, no, a person who has faith like Abraham, a great faith, you can overcome all of these issues. So if you came from a broken home, hey, if you're a person of faith, you can still be okay. If you'll obey the scriptures, if you'll cling to those promises, you can still succeed. It will not come as natural for you. You're going to have to walk in the Spirit even more than other people. But there are some people out there that are doing pretty good in this area who aren't even saved, because of the fact that they come from good homes where there was some stability, security. Even lost people can have successful marriages, remain faithful unto death, take care of their children, be loving. They can do all those things. And, and if you come from a home like that, that does give you an advantage in a lot of ways. Somebody already said in the comment too, the lack of the father is a big cause. And yes, that's huge. So because we have weak families, people are going to struggle in these areas. And what we've got to understand, we have weak families in America today for a reason. There is an attempt to change our culture into one that does not look like the nuclear family, with the father who is the provider and the mother who is the primary caregiver and stays at home and raises the kids, and the kids who are obedient to the parents. That is not being promoted today. I mean, we're having, same-sex relationships being promoted, homos adopting kids being promoted, just, all these things with mixed families. And that's not how things are supposed to be. But that's what's being promoted. And understand, the nuclear family has been being villainized on television for years. I mean, even if you go back to what would be considered wholesome family television in the 90s, it was always either like divorced parents or single moms, things like that. The only time you can really find shows where it was a mother and a father and their biological children. The only time you could find that in Hollywood back in the 90s was on black sitcoms, because they were, trying to, portray strong families in the black community where they really struggled and didn't have, it's statistically, they've always struggled with fatherless homes and having two parents. And so when you had like Family Matters, the Cosby Show, shows like that, it was always, mother and father. But at the same time too, even with that, the dad was always the dummy. The dad was always the nitwit, and the wife was always right and smarter and all that kind of stuff. And so even in those situations, it was not necessarily promoting the right thing. But we have very weak families today. And this is something we don't think about. And we haven't thought about this for a long time in our culture. And I want you to hear me out on this, because I'm not claiming something has to be done a certain way. But it says in Proverbs 13:22, a good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. So knows that a good man leaves that inheritance. And, and back then it was specifically talking about, land, farms, things like that. In Israel, they would receive a possession, they would receive a land, and these things would stay in the family, and they would build these farms, and they would build these houses and all these things, and they would pass it on to their children. And then the goal was for things to just keep getting better and becoming more prosperous as time went on. In our culture today, we don't do that. Okay. It has been promoted in television for a long time now. We've all seen the movie 1,000 times where, the dad wants the son in the family business, but, he's got a dream of being an artist or a ballerina or something like that. And so he leaves the family business to go follow his dreams, and it's always a happy ending. And listen, there's nothing in the Bible that says that you have to stay in the family business. But let's think about this for a minute. We also have a lot of insecurity. We have a lot of failure. We don't have strong families. We don't have people passing things down to their children. And so, just think about, how many people have no confidence for example, in the workplace, when it comes to their work, when it comes to the jobs that they do. But imagine if the line of work you were in was something you grew up around, something that your father was involved in, something that your grandfather was involved in, your great grandfather involved in. You know what? You're not going to have any insecurities about how to run that business, about how to farm, about how to raise animals, whatever it is. You are going to know how it's done because of the fact that, you're not just shooting from the hip. You're not just trying something out. No, you've been able to observe. And not only have you been able to observe, but you've also have counselors in your life, people that aren't just trying to make money off you. If you go and I get a job in somewhere in corporate America, I'm just an asset to them. I'm something that they are using to help make them more money. They're not really looking out for me. Where when it's in your family, they are looking out for you. And again, I'm not saying that the Bible teaches you have to stay on the farm or anything like that. But at the same time, too, it probably is a wise thing. If you come from a line of farmers, you're probably going to be pretty successful in that area, where if you just decide, I'm going to become an electrician. Well, there's nothing in the Bible that says you can't, but you're going to be starting all over and starting from scratch. And, you might struggle in these areas. And most people today, they're not doing anything that's like within the family. Everybody's just going and doing their own thing. So it's not a sin. Doesn't mean you're not going to succeed. But boy, you better hope, you've at least taught some character, some discipline, because even if, if my boys, if they don't stay in the family business, if you want to call it that, as long as I've taught them certain character traits, I believe that they will still be able to succeed in other areas. But just understand, most dads aren't teaching much of anything to their boys these days. They go to work. Their kids aren't around it. A lot of times they don't even see what they do. And then, they come home, sit on the couch, do whatever. The kids are at public school all day. They get home, they're in front of the television all night. They have no idea what their dad does to provide for a family. And a lot of young people are like that. A lot of these Gen Zers out there with their hand out, just expecting everything to be easy. Their fathers probably did work hard, and did, make an honest living, but they never saw it. They were never around it. And so they didn't watch their dad sweating. They didn't watch their dad getting dirty. They didn't watch their dad, dealing with stress. And, and as dads, you don't want to just bring all your problems home and, make your family deal with it. A lot of guys are good at just kind of leaving it at work. And I think that's okay. But just understand, a lot of young men, they have a very false sense of reality. And so just, imagine though, if these things have been in the family, like I said, as a pastor, I'm very confident in what I do. I mean, I get criticized a lot for a lot of things. And I'm not just saying when I say it doesn't really bother me. I grew up in a pastor's home. So it's like, I could either, and I've got several pastors in my family, I've got men that are in my life that I have known that have been serving the Lord since before I was born. So, I've seen a few things, and I know what works. I know what doesn't work. When it comes to raising kids, I've had people act like, I'm not hardcore enough on certain areas, but it's just like, dude, you don't even have kids that are my age. You have no proven product. So why would I let what somebody who has a loud mouth, why would I let that influence me or take away any of my security? I've got, and I'm very blessed, when it comes to marriage. Okay. I've got a lot of confidence in my marriage, not just because of my marriage, but, I came from a home where, my parents have been married for 43 years. Yeah. 43 years, I think. My grandparents on both sides, they were married till they died. My wife's mom and dad, they stayed married till her dad died. So, it's like we come from a long line of, success stories in marriage. And so the thing is, when it comes to how we do things, it's based on a lot of great examples, a lot of great counsel, and based on, the Bible properly preached, not somebody taking a verse and going to some crazy extreme with it. And so there's a lot of confidence in that, but many people, they don't have that kind of thing today. We have such weak families, and so it's no wonder they're insecure. It's, when they saw their dad or leave their mom, or their mom leave their dad, no wonder they're wondering if their wife's going to stay with them, and are being insecure because they've never had that. They've never seen that family like they should have. And so not many people today, not many are staying in the family business or continuing with what they were raised in. Except it's not a sin, but when you blaze your own trail, you're not going to have as much help and guidance along the way. You might have some pretty good failures. You're starting over, and you can do that. And understand, though, the newer something is to your family, the less confidence you're going to have, unless you're somebody with great faith like Abraham. And thank God for those who are just getting started when it comes to raising that Christian family. Thank God for those who are blazing the trail. In Hebrews 11:8 says, by faith Abraham, when he was called out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed and went out not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city who hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So Abraham, he was somebody who was from an idolatrous family. But God called him away from that family. God called him to go into a new land. And later we see that God said about Abraham, I know him, that he will command his children. God wanted him to raise up a nation that the Messiah would come from. And so God chose Abraham, and he was obedient, and everything Abraham did was brand new. Abraham was a true trailblazer, but he was somebody who followed God, but he was also somebody who was of great faith. So understand, there's nothing in the Bible that says you can't go and do something different and not be successful. If you have great faith, if you have great character, if you follow Bible principles, I think you can succeed in whatever area you go into. I'm just saying, though, culturally, when everyone is just doing their own thing, you know what we can expect as a side effect? Insecurity. Because people are out there trying to take advantage of you. But your parents, your grandparents, that's pretty unlikely that they're going to do that to you. So understand, most people today who are, and we're going to talk about this a little bit, insecure in their jobs. Again, it's because, they wouldn't be that way if it was something they had been doing for generations. Those people, they're very confident in what they're doing. So, so with everything we're talking about, no matter what your disadvantage is, you can make up for it if you're a person who has great faith. A lot of women today are insecure in their child rearing because, they didn't, or they don't have a mother that's close to them, or they didn't get the opportunity to watch how it's done because they don't have any younger siblings. And so that's one thing too. Moms really struggle in this area sometimes, and it can be a very emotionally difficult thing for them raising kids because, every mom has gone, felt like just a failure. And, when their kids are sick, they think they're a terrible mom because of it. When their kids aren't behaving, they're wondering what they're doing wrong in their parenting. And just the emotions and the things that women go through in child rearing. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay anything. It's the challenge is for real. It's very difficult. But understand every parent has kids that misbehave. Every parent has kids who get sick. Every parent has kids who embarrass them sometimes publicly when they do something they shouldn't do. But the thing is, if you're somebody who grew up in a home and you got to watch younger siblings grow up, you got to watch their rearing take place without all the pressure of it being on you. You got to see how your parents dealt with it. You got to see how they got through those challenges. You know, how that brat grew up and turned into a very wonderful individual. You know, and so when you see that kind of thing a number of times, it really helps calm you down. You know, I was the oldest of five. You know, I had four younger sisters, and you say, well, you know, it stinks for the youngest. Well, not necessarily, because if families stay close, you know, those younger siblings, they get to see nieces and nephews and watch that kind of thing. So you understand, in my family, my oldest is 21, probably gonna be getting married this year. My youngest is 2. So my kids, you know, are, you know, not only are they helping a lot with younger kids, but they're watching these things. They're observing all of this stuff. And, you know, and our youngest, Hannah, she's a monster. But, you know, I'm not laying up at night feeling like a failure as a parent, thinking, you know, that I'm a terrible parent doing something wrong, because I also have Tommy, who's 21, who used to be a monster and has turned out into a great adult. You know, I've got Abby, who was terrible as a little kid, cried all the time, but now she's like, you know, one of the sweetest young ladies that you'll ever meet. So, you know, when I look at Hannah, while, you know, it's like I don't enjoy disciplining, dealing with the problems and things like that, you know, I'm not having emotional turmoil, feeling like a failure as a parent, because I've seen this before. And so one of these days, you know, my kids are going to have some kids, and some of them are probably going to be pretty rotten, you know, for a while. And where a lot of people who never had the older siblings, you know, they're just going to be feeling like they're terrible parents and they're failing, and you're not failing. You know, you're going through what stuff that everybody goes through. And, you know, the truth is, you know, you need to hang on and get through it, but they don't have that confidence, and to go through the challenges of parenting and all that with insecurity, that'd be tough. And a lot of people are there. And I think strong families would really help. You know, I think if young ladies, you know, had mothers or good mother-in-laws in their life, helping them out, you know, with these things, letting them know that they're not a failure, and actually able to give them helpful advice and tell their own stories of their own failures and things, you know, I think that's very helpful. But, you know, we don't do that today. Families, you know, kids, they grow up and they just go do their own thing. You know, they're just going to go, you know, chase these dreams that they have in some other part of the world, all alone, away from any kind of good church. And I think, like I said, there's nothing that says you can't do some of that stuff. You know, if one of my kids, they decide they want to go and get married and go move to, you know, Wyoming, where they don't know anybody, there's no sin in that. There's nothing in the Bible that says they can't do that, and there's nothing that says that they won't succeed. But I do believe it will be challenging because of the fact that, you know, that's a whole different world out there, a whole nother state. They don't know anybody. They're not going to have a lot of the help and support around them. And, you know, it might not be the best idea. You know, I wouldn't recommend doing that unless there's a really good reason to, you know, to go to some place like Wyoming. So, you know, these are all things we got to think about, and strong families are very important. If you don't have a strong family, again, you need to start one, and you're going to have a lot of faith. You know, and I'm thankful that my dad was somebody, he came from more of a liberal Southern Baptist home, but, you know, he got around. My great uncle, got to stay with him for a while, who was a fundamental Baptist and lived the IFB lifestyle, not just in practice, but I mean, he meant it. It was in his heart. He wasn't just somebody putting it on. And, you know, my dad determined he was going to raise a family that way. And so he kind of blazed the trail in our family, and I'm very thankful for that. And the last thing I'm going to go do is just kind of blaze this whole new trail and figure out how to make, you know, life work, you know, being a hipster, skinny jean type. You know, I've not seen any success in that world, and I'm not about to go figure out how to make that work. I think I'll stick to what has already worked. So for a lot of people and for a lot of women, even just something like raising children, it's a brand new adventure where they're like just testing things as they go. They're experimenting along the way. And it's the same with dads. Where with me, I wasn't testing anything new. Okay? When the way I raised my kids, the way I raised my boys and girls, I wasn't trying anything. I did things that were tested and proven. And so we've just, a lot of families, they've let the public school do way too much of their job. That's a big part of the problem right there. You're depending on the public school and these other institutions to do things for you. And you know what? If I was letting the public school train my kids, teach my kids, develop character and discipline of my kids, I'd be freaked out myself. I wouldn't have any confidence. So I'm just not going to turn that over to them. This is too important to me. So another thing too, we live in a country with perverted values that aren't allowed to be challenged. So again, so we live in a culture where everybody's just supposed to do their own thing. They'll even criticize people who just follow in their family's footsteps because they've all watched the movies. I mean, I've even seen some really carnal preachers, like criticize guys who, were sent out by their dads and stuff. And I think that's pretty messed up. I mean, good night. Shouldn't it be the guy who knows you the best, who raised you, who was your pastor that sent you out? But no, what do they say? No, you need to go blaze your own trail and do your own thing. Well, why not? If I've grown up around something that has worked, why do I need to figure out a new way to do things? And these typically come from people who are trying to blaze new trails, trying new things, and are not turning out a good product, just good at making a lot of noise. So, like I said, all the stuff I do, I'm not a trailblazer. I like to let other people go first. And so the things that I'm doing in my life, the way I raise my family, especially, the way I pastor my church, I like to follow good examples that have, a product that I can test, improve, and I'm going to do what they did. And so, but we live in a country with perverted values and you can't challenge them. We live in a country full of insecure people. I mean, this is a major problem. Some of these articles, I don't know if I'm going to even get through all of them. They're talking about how this is a growing problem. But, part of it is, our country is full of groups that are desperate to receive affirmation of themselves. Okay, now we used to get these things from our families. We used to get these things from our like real life, flesh and blood friends, not social media friends, flesh and blood friends from our churches. But today, what we have is we've got groups that shouldn't be respected, seeking affirmation. For example, this is why homos need an entire month. An entire month. I tried to find the video. I guess it probably got taken off. It was on Twitter, where it was just like a montage of a bunch of trannies at a town hall demanding that they pass some bill or not pass some bill because they were saying it was going to be trans genocide. And pretty much all it was they're just promoting easy access of children, everything to body mutilation and things like that. And it was just like, because apparently these people are all killing themselves. I mean, I guess it's a huge problem in that world where they're just all killing themselves. Well, again, body mutilation will never make you happy. Trying to be a sex that you were not born is not going to make you happy. Being a pervert is not going to make you happy. Okay. None of those things are going to work. But notice how with all the efforts there are right now to try to, give these people affirmation, they're still killing themselves. I was just, I forgot where I was the other day. I was in a waiting room somewhere and Property Brothers was on, and they were, and I never liked those guys. They've always kind of creeped me out anyway, but they were fixing up the house of a drag queen. And it's just like, what in the world? This is supposed to be about fixing up houses, refurbishing houses, but y'all are going to use your show to just normalize the ultimate freaks of society. I mean, come on. But again, they think if we do this type of thing, this will stop these people from killing themselves. But it's not going to work. Except insecurity is why different groups need Hollywood to make sure that they are recognized and represented in every movie, award ceremony. I mean, what do we have to hear at the Oscars every year? There wasn't enough black people nominated. Wasn't enough. Now I heard an actor, somebody was saying the other day, we need to have I forgot what they called it, like You can't, they have best actor and actress, so we need something for all those people who aren't male or female. I forgot how they put it exactly, but it was really stupid. But, how is that going to make your life any better? I mean, listen, I'm so confident in my lifestyle because it's in the Bible, because it's something that has been proven in previous generations in my own family, that I don't need representation from Hollywood. I don't need any of that stuff. I don't need Hollywood. I remember I saw a thing one time, there was some Christian movie and it had this song that was real popular, and all these people were like demanding that the Grammys or something give it some kind of award. And it's just like, and they were all mad because it was getting snubbed at the Grammys. It's like, why wouldn't the Grammys snub Christian stuff? Do we need them? I don't know about you. I don't need the Grammys to represent me, to give me confidence. Okay. Now, if I was a freak pervert, I might need something like that. I might need the Oscars, parading somebody across the stage who everybody forces them to vote for them or nominate them for something. I might need to see that to make me feel good about myself. But I'm sorry, in normal land, we don't need that kind of stuff. I don't need Christians represented in Hollywood, any of that stuff. It's not necessary. I said insecurity is why different groups demand to be recognized by different political organizations. I mean, would I like to see some fundamental Baptists in the Supreme Court? Yeah, just because I think that would be good for the country. But will it make me feel better about myself if a fundamental Baptist gets elected to the Supreme Court? That would not make me feel one bit better about myself. It would make me feel better for the country. But if they get all Catholic trannies on the Supreme Court, I will still be 100% confident in who I am. I'll just be worried for our country if that kind of thing happens. Insecurity is why the news media is required to always be racially diverse, must include every gender, sexual orientation. They've always got to have that. Why? Because there's a lot of these groups out there killing themselves because of how pathetic they are, and they need somebody giving them security in those areas. But again, we shouldn't even need these things. I definitely don't need the news media, and so the world is dependent on everyone else to help them overcome their insecurities, but it's not working, and it never will. You know what we need? We need God. We need families. We need our church. We need real life, flesh and blood friends. If you have those things, you'll be fine. We don't need all the rest of that stuff. People of faith do not need these things. We have God. And said people in the past, even if they weren't Christian, they didn't really need these things because they had family. And people in the past, they also didn't need a lot of these things because they just weren't as perverted as our society is today. But what does it say in Romans 1:21? Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not at God, neither was thankful, but become vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. That's the atheist right there. And changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. And right here is a reminder why most of your militant atheists are also pro-sodomite, pro-trannies, all that kind of stuff. They're for all those things because ultimately they are just against God and they are God haters. And so they've tried to change who God is. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to change the Bible and that proves who God is. And so they've gone into this extreme perversion. And let me tell you, no matter what we do, no matter how many awards we give them, we can give them Pride Summer, and these people will not stop killing themselves and being miserable, and they won't stop getting AIDS. Even if we give them a whole season, it won't matter because what they're doing, it's wicked, it's vile and perverted. And so understand, if you are somebody who is becoming accepting of this type of thing, understand you will not be a secure person because you're wrong. And when you are right, it's easy to be secure. And and not just that you think you're right. No, it's been proven that you're right. And so that's why too, as somebody, I mean, I've got to be careful. I'm so confident in what I believe. I have to be careful not to cross over into arrogance, but I think too, arrogance a lot of times happens when people get insecure. They're trying so hard to find that confidence that, they don't know how to display it, in a calm way, in just in a way of clarity. They're not able to do that. They just kind of spaz out. I made that video last week about Jesus going to hell, and the pastor I featured on there, he came across as super arrogant on his videos, real condescending, but I thought, maybe this is how he came across in the video. And so I talked to him before I made the video, and I mean, he was very condescending, kept interrupting me. He kept laughing at stuff I was saying, and it became very apparent to me that this was a very insecure individual. And I think a lot of it has to do, he's from in the Bible Belt where there's Baptist churches everywhere. And so these guys are all kind of in competition with each other and all calling each other heretics all the time. So a lot of people, especially in that part of the country, they really struggle in this area of insecurity. And so, it was one of those things where it was just, ended up being a pretty pointless conversation, but then, maybe not feel bad featuring him on these videos. But, he kind of lost it. He just made another video responding to it where he went to 1 Corinthians 15 and used that to show Jesus delivered people from hell. But he forgot the verse where it says that hasn't happened yet. And I'm thinking about making a video on that. His response video was so bad that, I mean, it blew my mind. But that's what happens when you get stubborn. This is what insecure people do. They just dig in. They get stubborn and they become more wrong. And I've never heard anybody go to that passage in 1 Corinthians 15 and teach that happened at the resurrection of Christ. No. It says then it says when this mortal shall put on immortality, which is at the rapture, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O grave, where is thy victory? O death, where is thy sting? So everybody knows that hasn't happened yet, but he used that verse showing that it already happened. And what's going on here? Insecurity, arrogance, pride. These things will kill you. They will make you crazy. They will turn you into even more of a heretic. That's what happens. That's why when you get proven wrong on something, it's best to just get it right, fix it. That way you can move on, go forward, be confident. But now, I don't know, he'll probably remain in the state of insecurity and will continue being super weird and will probably butcher even more passages of Scripture. And we don't want to do that. And so now, and so one thing though too that people do when this kind of thing happens, and this is a real easy thing to do. But it says, Matt said on here too, which makes it more hilarious that he compliments commenters on his videos for being respectful. Yeah, and that's the thing too. He commented originally on my video that we had a cordial conversation, which we did because I was very cordial. I was very kind, as I always am. People get mad at me for how nice I am to opponents sometimes because I've publicly spoken with a lot of opponents. I mean, I get creamed for how nice I am to people that others would consider heretics. But it's just like, no, man, I'm confident in what I believe. I'm ready to have a public conversation about these things and show where they're wrong and prove where I'm right. And so I was cordial to him, but he was nasty to me on the phone conversation. But I let him be nasty. I don't need his approval to, feel good about myself. He might have thought I wanted that because I was asking if he thought I was a heretic. And the main reason I was asking about that is because, in his video he was talking about heresy and blasphemy. And I didn't want to use all these parts of the video where I had a whole montage put together where he's talking about, he's saying heresy, blasphemy, just using all this extreme rhetoric. And he told me I wasn't a heretic, but it was blasphemous. So it was like, all right, whatever. And I only used one part where he said heresy just because it was illustrating him using the outrage argument. But again, he made it hard for himself to make me look bad when he admitted I was cordial to him, because I was, you know, even though he was being super condescending and arrogant. But again, I don't need to do that, because I can handle, there's some things I can handle people disagreeing with me on. One, because I don't need their agreement to give me security. But then two, I'm also capable of understanding that there are areas where people can be wrong and they're not in danger of losing their soul. Okay? I don't believe what he's teaching is a damnable heresy. I don't think he's unsaved because of that. And so I don't need to put on this outrage argument. But folks, and listen, some of you online people, okay, I'm about to start calling you out, because you guys reek of this insecurity, some of you, and you have no ability to discern between a disagreement and a damnable heresy. Everything turns into damnable heresy. That's why so many people online, everybody, and they immediately go to reprobate when there's a disagreement. And it's just like, sometimes you just got to walk away, say, you know what, I think this person is wrong in this area, but they might still be a decent human being. Insecure people aren't capable of doing that. And man, some of you online people, you struggle in this area, but we do. We live in a world where everyone feels like they need to publicly state their opinion, because we all have a platform because of social media, but they also have these echo chambers of idiots to go along with them. You can always find a community of village idiots. I say that all the time. You can always find a community of village idiots. So you can be the most whacked out, weird, extreme person in whatever area, and you will find a community of fellow nut jobs to, give you affirmation and make you feel good about yourself. And so, but Proverbs 18:13 says, "He that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." There are some things that, there are some arguments, some people, they haven't heard the other side on it. They're not familiar. They've only heard misrepresentations of the other side on things. And so as soon as they hear something that doesn't sound like an echo of something else that they've heard before, they immediately freak out. For example, just some of the people when it comes to the Daniel 70th week stuff. I mean, there are people that they do not understand how I can be friends and fellowship with somebody who varies slightly on the timeline of events in Revelation. They don't understand that. And it's like, well, here's why. Because I also understand what's very clear in the Bible, and I also understand what's not real clear. I understand what's spelled out in Scripture, and I understand what is speculation. I understand what is heresy and what isn't necessarily heresy. And so because I'm capable of doing that, I can listen to something that somebody says that I might not even completely agree with, but I'm also able to understand this isn't that big of a deal. Okay. Now, some of you online people who only listen to a very select group, and if you listen to people outside that group, it's so you can expose them, just understand, and you're always looking for heretics. Okay. You're always looking for heretics. Just, understand your security is in individuals. And so you find these little groups out there, and, and if you can find that group of preachers that all, are saying the exact same thing, you find comfort in that. But understand, if you get a group of 5 pastors and they're all saying the exact same thing, chances are too, especially on a really complicated issue, it's because they're probably just following a pope and are afraid to deviate at all. But you can in some areas, and so, but a lot of you can't handle that. And so, when you go answering things, when you go declaring things before you even know what's going on, this makes you incapable of admitting you're wrong, and it usually causes you to become even more radical and to just blame everyone else for all your problems. But understand, things are going to get worse in our world. The Bible says in 2 Timothy 3:12, "Yea, and all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. But continue thou in the things that thou hast learned," watch this, "and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them. Some of you all have learned how to repeat back certain facts, but have you actually been assured of these things? Have they actually been proven to you? And notice the very next thing Paul says, and that from a child that has known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus. And you know, one thing that always concerns me, I see this a lot in social media land, and I'm not even saying all these are bad people. I'm just saying these people might be slightly misguided, and if somebody doesn't come along who actually loves these people and cares about them as individuals, they're probably going to get in trouble. But you see this a lot where people who've been saved for 6 months, you know, they will go and they'll start listening to preaching. They learn a few things, and man, do they get confident because they have a ton of confidence in that preacher. They've not known these things from a child. They've not been assured of these things, but they are ready to get in the fight, and they are going to echo these people. And then you'll see them get out there, and they're out rebuking false prophets. I mean, I've seen this on Facebook too. I've had to talk to some people about this too, where it's like these people, they haven't been saved very long, and they're really struggling morally. They're struggling in their personal lives. They're struggling in their marriage. But boy, they are online calling out the sodomites, talking about how wicked they are, and talking about all these wicked churches that won't ban sodomites from their churches and stuff. And it's just like, hey, you know, that's a real easy subject to be right on. But, you know, before you go on this crusade, can you learn how to, can you learn morality? Can you learn how to not be a fornicator? You know, can you figure that out first before you go after all these other people? But that happens. Everybody gets real anxious, and so that they're out there rebuking false prophets, exposing this preacher, exposing that preacher. Hey, you know, there's no hurry for you to do that. You know, why don't you watch for a little while? You know, some of these people that you're blindly following after, you know, you need to follow them for a while. You know, Paul said, knowing of whom thou hast learned them. And you know who he specifically referred to? You know, not some internet figure or even some preacher he met recently, his mother and grandmother. That's who he referred to. So, you know, sometimes we've got to admit, there's a lot of people out there who I've come across on the internet before who've said a lot of good things, a lot of things like it, but I didn't know them. I didn't know who these people are. And, you know, and so I'm liking what they're saying, but that doesn't mean they're great people or people that I should get behind or team up with. You know, let's watch them for a little while and, you know, see what they really are. And sometimes you find out, yeah, these people are crazy. And a lot of them too, you know, they end up turning out to be heretics later, you know, and so that's why it's very important that we, if we're going to have security, confidence, you know, you surround yourself with real live people. But let me go back to this article because it said a little bit about this. I'm not going to read all the stuff. There's one thing about job insecurity, body image insecurity. That's a big thing people are dealing with. But social insecurity and anxiety. Okay, now this is where some of you, okay, now I'm not, you know, understand too, all right, most of the people talking online, I don't even know who you are in real life except for the ones from our church. And most of the crazy railers, I'm not, that commonly frequent my channel, I'm not seeing them on there. All right. So don't, you know, if this nails you between the eyes, it's not my fault, but I got to cover this. But social insecurity and anxiety. It says another common type of insecurity surrounds the way we are perceived by our peers and the ease with which we interact with them. This insecurity can be a recurring low-level problem that can blossom into full-blown social anxiety disorder or social phobia. And signs of insecurity. And it says they are as variable as the condition itself, but there are some common tendencies you can look out for. And one is a low or superficial self-esteem. One sign of insecurity is low self-esteem or negative self-image, particularly when that image seems to be inconsistent with external observation. Low self-esteem means you think badly about yourself or your abilities. It can lead to other problems, especially concerning mental health. Talk to a doctor if your self-esteem is very low, because the measurement of self-esteem generally relies on self-report. Insecurity can lead to superficial self-esteem. People with insecurity often want to appear secure, and their explicit comments may be at odds with their automatic responses to certain stimuli. Deliberate self-misrepresentation or false behavior / information on social media can also be a sign of social anxiety. The act of faking then reinforces the social insecurity. And so right there, that is why, all of you extreme commenters, all of you super hardcore people out there sharing clips of just the most outrageous things being said, all of you constantly sharing stuff about homos and how wicked they are on social media. I'm not saying it's wrong to do that stuff, but some of you don't know how to regulate this. Some of you are going a little over the top. The things you're saying are a little too extreme, and I think it's because you're not sincere. That's what I think. Okay, all the indicators are that you are putting on. I think you want to be hardcore. I think you want to have a righteous indignation. I think you want to be like David. I think you truly do. I think you have that desire to be all those things, but you're not. Hey, you're just not those things. And understand, the more you fake, the more you put it on, the more you're going to struggle in these areas. And you know what? Just be real. Okay? Just be real about these things. Okay? If you are not as hardcore, if as you think you should be, don't pretend you are. If you don't hate sin as much as you should, don't pretend that you do. Ask God to help you have, the right kind of hatred for those things. But this being fake stuff, this being over the top, you're killing yourself with this. And people like me, we see right through it. And so I've watched it. I've seen it in with a lot of people in their churches and stuff. And it's just like, dude, you are going too far on this. What are you hiding? So, and here's another symptom: perfectionism. The inability to be satisfied with progress and need to control and refine projects until they are perfect can be a sign of insecurity. It stems from the sensation that you or your performance is never enough. It can appear as a manifestation of insecurity in any area of life, but is frequently found in cases of job insecurity and body insecurity. Eating disorders, for example, often appear along with both harmful perfectionism and attachment insecurities. So again, yeah, you're so hardcore, you've got to have everything perfect on this because for some reason, you're demanding that of yourself. And now you're demanding it from everyone else when nobody else is demanding it from you. But you're doing this, and it's some kind of self-loathing you've got going on. Another thing, self-isolation. Social insecurity can lead people to avoid social interactions, isolating themselves. Sometimes these people prefer to interact virtually in internet situations they feel they can control. Man, I could start naming some of y'all out there right now that, man, you are all over the place online. Boy, you talk big, you talk tough. Some of us see right through you. We know exactly what you are. And these are not godly people. These are not people who love the Lord and that love other people. These are bad people, and they're acting the way that they are because they are trying really hard to pretend they are something that they are not. In reality, they're opposite of what they are putting out there. And again, I am 100% for being against perversion, against homos and all that kind of stuff. But, there's a reason the homos are always like thinking that people who preach against them stuff are probably somebody in the closet. And it's because there's been a lot of people like that over the years that were, they were perverted themselves and they were struggling with that. And so that was the way that they coped, is they just were super extreme against them. And don't get me wrong, some people have a real, true, genuine disgust for perversion. And I know we would all claim to have that, okay? Obviously, I claim to have that. I think everybody would claim to have that. But at the same time, we need to understand too, some people are just trying to have that. And when you go too far, Okay, it's an indicator that something is wrong, and I'm sensing some self-loathing here too, and so watch out for these people. And so, because we've seen that a lot with some of the preachers in the past who said some of the craziest things, they were the biggest perverts. So, boy, there's a lot more of this we could talk about. I think I'm going to stop with that, because we could go on and on. There's a lot of good stuff in that article that I was reading, but either way you look at it, insecurity, it's not a good quality, especially in a man. It's not a good quality. And I believe faith is a huge thing. Faith is one of the most important things that you can have. Except if everything you're trying to do is new to you, dig into the Word of God, trust what His Word says, and then do what you can to surround yourself. If they're not in your family, find a good church with good, proven leadership. And if you're going to a church where everybody's been saved for 2 years, you're not, you ought to be able to find all generations in a good church. They're gonna have all the generations there. You need to have people that are contemporary with you and in the same situation, but it's nice too to have people that are farther down the road than you too. And that, I'm telling you, that would be very helpful to you. And don't just go along with whoever's saying the most extreme thing. Someone said a second part of this would be great. And yeah, I might cover more because I didn't get to near as much as I wanted to on this. I went pretty long, but yeah, we'll go ahead and maybe in 2 weeks. I'm hoping. I don't have anything lined up for sure yet, but I'm hoping to do another live stream in the evening next week. I'm trying to do this afternoon, the Sunday or the Tuesday afternoon every other week, and then Tuesday evening every other week is kind of what I'm trying to do. But it all depends on guests and things like that. It can be difficult lining up sometimes. But either way, let's get this. Let's get secure in what we do, and it'll make a big difference in your life. So I appreciate everyone watching. Good to see Pastor Austin. Good stuff, brother. Appreciate you coming on. A few other Pastor Woods. Good to see you on there. He said a lot of young preachers are coming out of college, inundating with teachings of Born That Way. I know, man. And I'm glad you mentioned that too. I've been meaning to preach a sermon. I've had like 14 things I'm wanting to preach right now, and but I'm telling you, this one of the things that's really messing people up with the homo stuff, what we believe out there, is a lot of people have accepted that they are like born that way and are starting to see them as a race, and it's really messing up their teaching, especially in the Bible, on that stuff. And so it's true. Josiah Jones, lots of hairy ticks. Interesting way to put it. But Tim C, thanks for joining. Brother Matt, Ellison, looks like she had to leave. Bonerges, I never even know how to say that. Good to see you on there. Are you back in town, by the way? I know who you are in real life. Are you back in town? You'll have to let me know. But anyway, I appreciate everybody joining me. In our area, people are trying to be the Frisbee hippie. I don't even know what that is, but it doesn't sound good. I am the anti-hippie. I do not like hippies. Got a huge problem with them. But anyway, I do. I appreciate everyone coming on here. I hope this was a help and a blessing to you. God bless you, and we will see you all next time.